Will you build a home or a hotel, a traditional farm or a server farm? Introducing Hacienda Castilla. St. Matthew's Assurance presents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Over 800 square miles of pristine, uninhabited coastal property in central Chile, ready for industrial, business, and residential development. Hacienda Castilla features almost unlimited open spaces and some of the most beautiful beaches in South America. With parcels ranging from 20 acres to over 200 acres, Hacienda Castilla will be adjacent to Copia Port A, the deepest natural port in all of South America. Experience future-forward development limited only by your imagination. What will you create at Hacienda Castilla? Become part of something completely new. For more, visit haciendacastilla.net today.
Hello, Vaxxchoice community. Thank you so much for joining us today for a live episode of Truth Be Told, hosted by Todd Callender. How are you doing today, Todd?
Happy Wednesday. It's Red, and I see you got the corporate memo. I'm really impressed. Yay. Doing good. Happy to be here. How about you?
I'm very excited for our guest today, Clinton Ohlers. I hope I'm saying that right.
Yes.
Sorry, Clinton. I meant to review that before saying it. But as a pregnant woman who almost hemorrhaged in my first emergency C-section, it's people like him and organizations like he has that gives me hope, and to not be so scared that that'll happen, because when I told them I refused a transfusion, before the birth, they were like, thought I looked at me like I had three eyes, and they were like, oh, but you could die. And I'm like, okay, but I'm trusting God that I won't die. And they were like, and I was like, well, do you distinguish vaccinated and unvaccinated blood?
Yes.
And they just looked at me like, why would we do that?
Amazing.
Because you just rolled out a major experiment on the globe, and most people received an experimental vaccine. That's why.
We had this fight. We had this fight for a lot of babies that needed blood, and we did battle with hospitals who same thing. They're like, what are you talking about? It was horrible. I'm so grateful Clinton's here. This is going to be a really important conversation for people to take to heart, because everybody knows somebody going through some medical challenges right now. And the blood you're getting from the hospital is not safe. It is completely contaminated. Just what you said, they're not looking. So folks, pay attention to this one. This is important.
Yes, it is. And if you have any questions about safe blood or how it works, or any questions you may have for Clinton or Todd, please make sure to drop them in the comments below, and we will see them and address them at the end. Todd, I'll be in the background enjoying the show, and I'll be back later.
Beautiful. As always, Melissa, thank you. And to CloutHUB Vaxxchoice family, thanks for putting this together, folks. For those that don't know, Wednesday is our red shirt day. We do it in solidarity, just as a group. That's kind of a family thing now, because we've all become family. You too can join in the Red Wednesdays. Red for the color of our party with the president in power, red just because it's a nice color, and it's a human bond that we do with each other, just to know, hey, they're over there. That person counts. In this case, it's our janitor. He counts. Everybody counts. Why? Because you are human. You are God's creations, and that is the point of this today. Clinton Ohlers is here to preserve humanity, preserve the genome that God gave us to preserve God's creations. At the end of the day is what it's about. And the gangsters, as you well know, on the other side, those who call themselves political figures, they're really just thugs for the most part. The permanent bureaucracy, those who seek our destruction, they also need to change our bodies into a digital format. How are they going to do that? mRNA, and you all know that when Mr. Trump rolled out artificial intelligence with mRNA, people went crazy. Why? Because you've done your job spreading the word. mRNA is for no other purpose than gene modification. That's it. It's to genetically program your body with synthetic RNA or synthetic DNA in the case of Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca. Same effect. It's genetic modification. They programmed your body to do things. In this case, it was to manufacture spike proteins, in other words, known as prions, poisons. But they've got to digitize you. Play that first clip, would you, Melissa? I think it sets the groundwork for what I'm going to show everybody.
Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
If you go all the way back to Norwood Wiener, the goal of creating artificial intelligence was to create an all-seeing eye. The global computer sees all, sees everything, and to become gods.
And the Sentient World Simulation, SWS, went live in 2007.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe? These nanobots, these blood cell-sized devices, will be going in our bodies. We'll have some go inside our brains through the capillaries, non-invasively. They'll be interacting with our biological neurons. They'll put our brains on the internet, and they'll also enable us to enter a virtual reality environment from within the nervous system. So if I want to go in a virtual reality environment, the nanobots will shut down the signals coming from my real eyes and my real skin and create the signals that would be appropriate for the virtual environment. And then it'll feel like I'm in that environment.
Is it real?
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply
electrical signals interpreted by your brain. They got that right. The Matrix was a documentary, folks. It was not a sci-fi movie. And that's the point of what I wanted to share with you today. Look, this has happened. For those of you who've been paying attention, you know that. We had done a very good job, by the way, of highlighting inpersona.com. Those are the people that brag of having already harnessed 1.4 trillion heartbeats to mine cryptocurrency using your biorhythms. And there we go. We chased them away. So many people went to the website to look for themselves because they couldn't believe this was commercialized, that they ended up changing their website name. I guess now it's dev at or something like that. But the reality is this: they're using those devices, Fitbit, phone, whatever, wearables as they call them, to receive signals from your wireless body area network and transmit that information through the cell phone network, now the mesh network, thanks to Google, to the giant computers who seek to turn you into a digitized person. By the way, Larry Ellison and his company already got popped for creating a digital twin of everybody. They already did it. They didn't ask anybody. Where does informed consent come in this? They're stealing your person. They're stealing, whether it's a soul, I don't know, but they're stealing you, your brain, and they're putting it into a cloud computing machine that now uses, now operative word, now uses your biorhythms for power and your body as a cloud computing node. Don't believe me? Yeah, well, we brought the evidence for you. So if you wouldn't mind, show the personal telemetry for digital ID. These are their scientific papers, ladies and gentlemen. This is a mature area of science. It is robust. In fact, it is so robust that they've already written standards. Look it up for yourself. The IEEE is the international group in charge of standards as it relates to using our bodies and the bionet of things which already exists. The lipid nanoparticles, aka nanobots, are already in everybody. Why? Because they made them contagious, and they also made them air dispersible. It means coming out of the chemtrails. They are in there. And of course, if you paid attention, you would have seen the NASA Langley research paper of 2001 said by 2025, they're going to be dropping lipid nanoparticles, aka nanobots, from the sky to drill into our lungs and infect our bodies. That is, our government said that that's what they were going to do in 2021. And sure enough, they did. The interesting part about that document, thank you, Melissa, is it talks about what frequencies they're using to access your body. And I was a bit surprised to understand that it's a wide range in the megahertz belt, that the transmission to and from the cell phone towers, they're going with the microwave. That's the 5G band, 300 megahertz, 300 gigahertz. This all happens in lower megahertz range, which I found to be very interesting. But they've identified the channels, and they have, again, a very robust means of harnessing your information, harnessing your body to communicate with the outside world without you even knowing anything about it. And now you see the HHS wants to deregulate mRNA tech. They say it's safe and effective. We proved it with COVID. So we don't have to worry about standards anymore. If we think, and literally this is the legal standard, if we think that this is a safe application of mRNA, we don't have to go through the investigative new drug process, right? The robust one we had to go through for every other medication sold on the planet. They're waiving that, and they're building mRNA factories all over the planet. In the darkest parts of Africa, for example, South America, I would not be surprised if mRNA factories already exist in Antarctica, because they're on the way. My concern, Mr. Kennedy, is that you've got a spy right there underneath you who's soon to be appointed as the assistant secretary, as I understand it. Watch out for these transhumanist guys, because they are on the way. Sorry, I want to kill these people. They are on the way to hamstring you. They are on the way to subvert you. So you're going there to ensure safety in medicine, to ensure public health serves the people. But the people that you're being asked to hire, those are the ones that are trying to see this mission through to fruition. I encourage you, please, to look at our documents. We're making them available in the comments section. You can look at anything and everything we've got. Of course, I also encourage you, please, to go to Vaxxchoice, VAXXchoice.com, where you find a library full of information. And then finally, if you haven't been paying attention on CloutHUB, there's a news section. If you type on the news section, you're getting our up-to-date information, everything that we're learning and turning around to give to you. You don't have to wait for us anymore. It's all right there. Have a look, be informed, share what it is you know. Today is one of those scenarios, because we've got Clinton here. Clinton is the expert on safe blood. I will tell you, for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been doing a lot of legal work, free legal work, as a matter of fact, for people who needed safe blood, and we had a heck of a time finding it. I'm sure that we ended up tracking Clinton and his team down at some point. But there was, again, an effort to ensure that everybody got lipid nanoparticles, nanobots in their blood. So, of course, the blood banks didn't filter out the nanobots. Of course, they let the spike proteins be in them, because that was the plan, to make vaccines contagious. And it's actually these components of the vaccines that are the real goal. It is the lipid nanoparticles at 18 gigahertz. They open up like so, and they distribute whatever the pathogens are that they're carrying. I say pathogens because that's what we found them making. We haven't found them making anything helpful to humanity. It is all pathogenic. So this is the reason why you got to get it filtered out. So Clinton, welcome to Truth Be Told. Thank you for being here. I'm going to stop blathering on, and I wanted to compliment you on your nice appointed attire. My red T-shirt doesn't hold a candle. Thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and Safe Blood.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah. So what Safe Blood is we're the world's leading provider in safe blood matching. So what we do is we match non-mRNA vaccinated blood donors with recipients who, whether they're vaccinated or unvaccinated, just don't want any initial exposure or further exposure to vaccine components through the blood when they have a surgery that they need to undergo. So that's what we do. We match, and that's the most effective and efficient way at this time to get blood to people who want it.
So many questions. Okay, how did you get here? Tell us a little bit about your background. I know you're a PhD. I know you're really good at communication, but how did you get to Safe Blood?
Okay. Well, Safe Blood was started in 2021. It was George Della Pietra. He and other naturopaths in Europe. We originated out of Switzerland. We're looking at blood under just medical school level microscopes of people who had been vaccinated. And they were finding that everyone they looked at was having anomalies in the blood, some as severe as they might not see it except in a stage 4 cancer patient. And that was surprising because it was 100%. So when they saw that, now I'm not saying it was necessarily 100% of everyone, but it was 100% of what they observed. So they said there's going to be, George says there's going to be an issue with the blood supply very quickly as this rolls out.
That's right.
And that has been abundantly confirmed, right? We've had
undeniable.
Yes, we've had an abundance. In fact, I'm working with Dr. James Thorpe, MD,
Oh yeah,
and George Della Pietra on a peer-reviewed article looking at injuries that have occurred just from blood transfusions without
yes,
exposure
yep,
to the vaccine directly. Okay,
absolutely.
and they've mirrored what we saw in the VAERS. Like some of the first people to be injured by this, what did they die of? They died of blood clotting, those large fibrinogen clots that we had only seen in vaccinated individuals. Now we were seeing them in
Yes.
people from blood transfusions. But there's a gamut of things: Bell's palsy, a whole range. Yeah, a whole
Well,
range.
let me add
Yeah.
to that. Hang on one second, because this is actually part of what it is we're doing in our law firm to seek recovery for our service members. The reality is all of those maladies that you see show up in people that receive blood transfusions, or even people who got the shots but haven't given blood, the result is the same. 1,291 new diseases were the result of these shots, and they were measured and found in the military's own study, C4591,001. They listed out in Appendix 1. It goes on for 9 pages of diseases caused by the shots. They call them serious adverse events of special interest. The reality is those are side effects. And you can talk to anybody that's had the shots, anybody that's got a malady resulting therefrom, and you can be assured that at least one, if not multiple, of those diseases that they identified came causally from those shots. So you're absolutely, positively right. And I also think, doctor, that sexual intercourse is another means by which, I'm not sure it's as bad as a blood transfusion, but we've seen some evidence that that is conveying the same lipid nanoparticles, the same toxins, pathogens.
Yeah, we've been hearing about that evidence also.
Yeah.
At Safe Blood, what we really try to do is we're looking to make the blood supply safe, the global blood supply safe. And so we really focus on only the science that we know is demonstrable, or the necessary conclusions, right, of observation.
I think it's more than that. I really do, Clinton. I've seen some of your other work. The reality is that you're in the pro-human business. You're in the business of trying to see our species propagate and go forward, because it's not just a function of safe blood, but as I understand it, you're getting donors to not only give blood, but they're also sometimes donating sperm and eggs, all for free. But this is about the survival of our species.
Right. Well, we have a sister site, Safe Reproduction, that people can go to. And that's if they're interested in blood donating. And let me, or not blood donating, but like reproductive donation. And let me tell you something that's very important there is breast milk donation. Okay. Because the nanolipid particle will be transferred through the breast milk, which is a blood product itself. And so really for pregnant mothers, the safest thing that you can do for your infant, one of the safest things you can do when you're breastfeeding is if you've been highly vaccinated. We don't have studies on this to back it up, other than we know that it's happening. And that's one reason I'm very encouraged by hopefully Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being,
I pray so,
appointed today, being confirmed, because I bet you there are all sorts of people at CDC and FDA, all part of captured apps institutions. They would love to see valuable and important research going forward. There's another group that just formed, the Advanced Biological Research Group. Steve Hatfill, my colleague James Thorpe, they're involved in that. There is critical research that needs to go through, and we need to know exactly how far this affects things like breast milk, which we know it does, right? Because that nanolipid particle is capable of surviving, independently, and it circulates in the bloodstream. It's kicked back out. If the cell doesn't need all of the mRNA that it received, which it doesn't, because it's going to get more than it needs, it kicks it out in its own exosome, its own nanolipid particle, goes in, ends up in the intestinal tract of infants, which is not surprising that we're seeing them then being affected by that. So there's tons of research that needs to be done. We need to know what tissue. I just spoke with James Thorpe. He's talking about, we need to know what tissue is more affected, what tissue is less affected. We really could be on the verge of something very, very valuable here going forward. So we need to see Kennedy confirmed, and we need to keep people safe in the meantime. And that's what Safe Blood intends to do.
Yes, that's my point. Is you're busy saving humanity while you're looking for further answers. And I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the approach, and congratulations for your work with Dr. Thorpe. This is pro-human, right? This is the point that we've been after for a long time, is that if we don't stop this, then our species is gone, whether that is by transmutation into a new species, which has already happened, or whether that's by our death and destructions immaterial. Either way, Homo sapiens sapiens is becoming a thing of the past if we don't do things like what you're talking about, remedial help. And on that note, some of the things that I'd seen you relied upon previously, and I tangentially ran into this myself, was studying reproductive rates in Hungary. Tell us about what you found there, if you don't mind.
Well, that was fascinating. And this ties into how I got into all of this, which was your original question, right? So I was teaching at the University of Hong Kong. I was there on a 2-year visiting assistant professorship position. It was essentially an advanced postdoc. And we that had ended just as COVID hit. So we planned to stay in Hong Kong, but with COVID coming out, we came back. And that was fascinating.
Good choice.
Because we knew back in February, just from the evidence that was coming out them from articles in the Lancet, an important article tracking, contact tracking the early COVID victims, I guess you call it, who
they are
got
victims.
the contagion.
That's exactly what they are.
That demonstrated it could not have come from the Wuhan virus. And then you had virologists already looking at the ACE2 receptor and things, saying this could not have been natural. So we knew this by February of 2020 when we left Hong Kong. We left on. We made a decision very rapidly. We found out from friends that it was on the mainland that it was much worse than they were letting on.
Yes.
And so we basically left Hong Kong in 3 days, just packed up and we're out and, left most of our possessions behind, came back to the US. And there were a couple of things that fascinated me when I got back here. See, my PhD is in history with a focus on history of science. And cool. And I've been particularly interested in science and religion. It was much more linked to science and its relationship to theology and beliefs in miracles and things like that. But when I came back, I started to see very quickly that the most interesting thing going on in the history of science was going on in the present, that we were seeing some sort of colossal train wreck of which I had never imagined or could have imagined. And, one of the hat tips was that to just discuss with, colleagues and friends in academia, the fact that, well, of course, this is unlikely that it came from the Wuhan lab. I was treated as if I was wearing a tinfoil hat. In fact, one friend, an associate professor at Vanderbilt, said to me, well, and this is a good friend. He said, well, you're in tinfoil hat territory now. I'm like, tinfoil hat territory? Like, it was not controversial in Hong Kong to think that this came from the Wuhan lab. I mean, that was like, they're like, of course it's probably from the Wuhan lab. I mean, it's 20 minutes down the street. It's like, we know the CCP is not particularly known for its honesty. There was just too many, like, it wasn't controversial. I mean, maybe it did come from the wet market, but here it was controversial. And the other thing that was controversial, made no sense, was hydroxychloroquine. And so
why did that not make sense?
Well, because there was tons of anecdotal evidence, and I'm not talking about like low quality anecdotal evidence, high quality anecdotal evidence. People using nursing homes were devastated most rapidly from COVID.
Yes.
But then you had nursing homes that weren't. And what was the only difference? The variable was they were using hydroxychloroquine. And I would hear all of these nonsensical arguments like, well, correlation isn't causation. All of those people might have gotten better anyhow. Well, let me tell you, these are, it's a terrible thing when you hear intelligent people with PhDs using cliches to cover up logical.
I want to understand that.
Yes, because guess what? There's always correlation when there's causation.
Of course.
If there's no correlation, then there's not causation.
Exactly.
The first thing you look for is correlation, right? And the first thing you say in a crisis is, wow, we have this group of people here with an 80 or 100% survival rate, whereas just down the road, they've got like a 65% death rate.
Yes.
What are they doing? Oh, they're doing hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin and checking zinc levels. Well, let's check. So I started writing on that. Eventually that got me into writing for World Tribune as their investigative editor. And
beautiful.
I did, it's featured in the film by John Davidson, Epidemic of Fraud. I worked there because,
by the way, John Davidson's in the background. I don't know if you know that he works.
Oh, good.
Our team.
Hi, John. Yeah, so John interviewed me on that because that article, I think, as the history of science is written, this study that came out of the Journal of the American Medical Association in April of 2020 will turn out to be very important. It preceded the Lancet study, that fraudulent Lancet study, by 2 weeks. And what that study did, the one I looked at, it was described as putting the nail in the coffin of hydroxychloroquine, and by no less eminent a figure than the head of infectious diseases down at Vanderbilt University, and a man with a resume that just absolutely is astonishing for its length and quality. So when he said that on CNN, you know, that was how that article was received, William Schaffenberger, and so Schaffner, and so. So I looked at this study because I was interested to know, well, why is the medical community so against hydroxychloroquine? I mean, I can understand being skeptical, but why so vehemently, rabidly against?
Yes.
And this was one of the articles that was sent to me as support for that. So I looked at it and I said, I don't get this. This seems to have in the data, ignore the intro and the conclusion, the abstract, look at the data itself. It seems to show hydroxychloroquine works. And sure enough, if you just restructured the study groups in a way to actually answer the question, does this drug work? Yeah, the standards of deviation were off the charts. So
yes, they were.
And I was astonished, you know, and here I am, somebody in history of science doing this. And it was right around that time that then Harvey Risch at Yale came out. And that was so valuable because I felt like, I felt like I was shooting for the moon.
You were alone.
I'm not an MD, I'm a historian of science. Basically, I'm critiquing the medical field, and Harvey Risch comes out, and then I realized, I'm really on the right track.
You're in good company.
Yeah, and so,
Dr. Risch.
Yeah, that felt really good.
Amongst others. I mean,
yeah.
I was going to say, to be fair, what my experience was is we had our expert witnesses. You would have made it for a great one, by the way. But we were all being subverted in every way. So you couldn't even find some of the other people, and you certainly couldn't do what we're doing right now because it was all censored. So when I saw all the censorship to cut off voices that disagreed, that was really the first indication. Holy crap! This is intentional. This is a democide. They are poisoning people, and they don't want us to see the cure, because they need to get that mRNA into people. And that, of course, turned out to be true.
Yeah, and they were poisoning the evidence that should have led people to the cure.
Absolutely.
That's what I actually had this in an article, and Cal did peer review on it for me. So you can't put that. I said they are poisoning. They looks like they are consciously poisoning the evidence.
They were.
Now, of course, I thought, well, this is great. We're going to get this article out there. This is going to help save lives. I was, within hours, I was suspended on Twitter for putting that article out there, and I did not get back on until Elon Musk took over.
Wow.
Yeah, I was.
So how are you feeling about Elon? Did that act help you embrace him, or do you still have concerns given the Neuralink and the mRNA? Because I got to tell you, I want to believe, I really do. But the reality is they don't need wires going in and out of people's heads. They've had this technology for decades to affect what happens in your brains. These little nanobots have been around a long time. And so to paint this picture that, it'll be helpful, we'll just put some wires in your brain, it'll give back, your autonomy. When I have whistleblowers literally hooking patients into the hospital's computers remotely through their wireless body area network for years. They're monitoring patients with an iPad, and they're on a different floor and down the hall. There's no wires going between them. That when you come to understand how robust this science is, and peer-reviewed papers to the point where they have standards, these people have been at this for a very long time, doctor. And when you see those guys in ivory towers and the schools you talk about, Johns Hopkins is a good example. They have been paid for decades to develop this. They were part of the program. And one of the reasons why you see the hostility towards ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, chlorine dioxide, Trump bleach, is because they freaking know. It was Fauci that actually wrote, as relates to SARS-CoV-1, there was no better medication than hydroxychloroquine. He wrote that out in the Lancet. And I don't know if you're aware, But those very same people and the gangsters in our CDC and FDA buried the fact that they were doing autopsies the whole time from 2020 all the way to 2024. And in 74% of the cases, the causation of death was the shots. They knew this, they buried it. It's intentional. And that's what we came to find in our suit against the DOD. We spent 3 years litigating it. There is no other explanation than this is an intentional attack on humanity, which is why safe blood is important. Because
Well, thank you. Yeah.
if it is, it's critically important. And trust me, I've litigated all over the United States trying to help little kids that are, getting some kind of an organ transplant or whatever. And hospitals will not. I mean, it's unbelievable. They will not take safe blood absent a whole lot of work to get them there and threats. And we end up having to use the Americans with Disabilities Act to force them to allow safe blood. So I hope people look at this and they understand it, that, hey, this is an answer to our prayers. But let's say somebody's in nowhere, Oklahoma, and they need safe blood. How do they get it from you? How do they get their hospital to agree to use it? How do you keep it safe and protected? Because blood, it expires. Tell us the meat and bones, if you don't mind.
So fortunately, in the U.S., in most hospitals, right, there has been, if you ask for a directed donation, that's what this is.
That's exactly what we asked for. A directed donation. They would not do it.
I know. Is this, were you finding this in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest?
No, this was in the Bible Belt, if you can imagine. I found this in California, Oklahoma, Missouri. I think there was a case in New York, Texas. We're talking about, a middle of America kind of farmer type of people. We couldn't. One was in Denver. It was horrible because that's where I'm from, and I actually know the hospital, and I'm talking to their legal counsel saying, why will you not allow for directed blood? It says that you will. And he said, it's policy change. I said, that's not law. We want directed donation from a relative who hasn't been vaxxed. And that's when it all went south. And they ended up effectively kicking the people out, saying, we don't want to operate on your kid.
Yeah, we have always told our members to, and what we do is we have a membership plan. A lot of people.
Good. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah,
we can join in the membership.
Yes, that's the best way to. That's the way that's most helpful to us. We have there's initial annual fee for the first year, and then there's a monthly membership that you're a part of that covers the individual, any children still living at home, under who are minor status. And then what it means, it's you're in our system. Okay.
Fabulous.
And then if you need a blood transfusion for a planned surgery, which is a very important qualifier, by the way, we'll get back to that, but for a planned surgery that you're going to have, then we can arrange ahead of time for that person in Oklahoma, for example, to have a donor who can get blood to them. We had one woman.
Fabulous.
Los Angeles needed 10 units, and
that's a lot of blood.
Yeah, that's a lot of blood.
Holy cow.
And so that's almost an entire blood transfusion, basically, because you have maybe 13 to 15, most people, maybe a little bit more. There's, but anyhow, so that is, and by being a monthly participant, I tend to think of it as people want to find ways. There are a lot of patriots, a lot of good citizens, a lot of people just waking up to what's been going on. I think all of our wake up trajectory has been different. The level of naivety I had, even when I started that article on hydroxychloroquine, back at the beginning of all this in 2020, is very different than now. And so everybody's waking up at different rates. And I think people are realizing they need to be in this fight, right? It's not going to be any good for us if everyone 20 years from now has had mRNA vaccinations, and there is no such thing as mRNA-free blood.
It's the fight for our survival as a species. Nothing short of that.
Absolutely. One way that you can join that fight is you can become a member of Safe Blood. I mean, the least cost to yourself would be if you become just a donor member. If you're a non-vaccinated individual, non-mRNA vaccinated, you can become a donor, and then you're just available. What that means is, like, in Oklahoma, you might never be called on. But now, you mentioned Oklahoma, and maybe there's somebody with your blood type there. Well, we have to have redundancy built into the system. So even if you're just there helping create redundancy so that we know we have coverage, that is fantastic. I want to help you with that.
I mean, that in reality, that this is what took me out of my regular CEO insurance job and turned me back into a litigator.
Wow.
There was no choice. You know, I
Yeah.
recognized the fight for what it was. And if somebody didn't stop it, and somebody stand up, then nobody else was going to. We were going to get ran over. You said something really important here a second ago. So I guess that was my appeal. Ladies and gentlemen, donate blood, become a member, please. This is for you and your family. But you said something really important I want to go back to. You said non-vaxxed blood, and then you corrected yourself and said mRNA vaxxed. And I want people to understand something. We came to understand the same hydrogel that they put into the COVID shots is now being introduced into insulin, lidocaine, every injectable whatsoever. So how are you screening out, you know, let's say they got to have B vax. It definitely has the hydrogel in it. It is mRNA, but they don't know that because they haven't been told anything about it.
Yeah, these are great questions. Let me, as I get into answering that, let me just, can I mention a little bit more what the process is?
Yeah,
yes,
please. I'm sorry.
So, you know, ideally, what we hope is that most of our members are not going to ever need this service, right? Hopefully you don't have to have a surgery and you don't need a transfusion. But what you're doing by teaming up with us, right, by being a monthly member, is you're saying, hey, this is a part where I can fight for the future, right? We've got Robert F. Kennedy fighting for the future at HSS right now. We managed to avoid a second steal, incredibly.
That's right.
I'm still in shock about this, right? Because of people that did voter integrity that was so important and pressed cases legally. So the blood supply is very important. It's going to be important for your children. It's going to be important for your grandchildren. If you can join us for $10 a month to help us keep this safe, you're doing something far above and beyond just covering yourself. And then you're covered too if you need it. You know, we have $1,000 lifetime memberships. We're actually going to roll out this month. We're rolling out free memberships for all the military members who were falsely expelled or wrongly expelled.
Oh, fantastic.
For avoiding the vaccine.
Let me say one thing right here, because I want to understand. I don't live in the United States. If I want to become a lifetime member, does that cover me? Can I somehow get access to blood? Do I need to go to the United States?
Well,
you have international.
Bahamas. So I'm sorry, did I just dox you there?
Not at all. No,
okay.
It's where I live. That's the Caribbean.
And as I understand, the Bahamas has some interesting stuff going on because in developing countries outside of the U.S., directed donation is the normal means of getting blood.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That's right.
There is, you know, we are in over 55 countries. And so it is international. Now, ironically, we're based out of Switzerland. You can't get directed donations in Switzerland. The US, Europe is very, very restricted. And this is all new with COVID, by the way. 10 years ago, this was not a controversial thing. Directed donations were never controversial. Very often people would say, well, you know, this, remember from my church is willing to donate blood and I don't know where this other blood's coming from. It'd just be more comfortable. Right. So if you're outside of the country, it might take a little more legwork or involvement. But one of the benefits for people in developing countries where directed donation is normal, it's totally non-controversial. I mean, if you're in Costa Rica, if you're in the Bahamas, if you're in Africa, if you're in Paraguay, there's so many places where that's how you get blood. You have your people come in and support you at the hospital.
They do. If there's a bad car wreck, type A, can you come and donate? You know, and that happens quite a bit. Well, that makes me feel so much better because going back to the whole premise is that this is about humanity surviving. And I would suggest to you, by the way, in terms of finding sources for directed donations or even stuff that you store, and I want to know how long you can store it. But, you know, outside the United States, very few people took these shots in the non-developed nations. Africa was like 2%. This country was less than 25%. Why? Because most of these folks have already been experimented upon by Bill Gates, right? Him and his gangsters. And it's actually how I got here is I was running clinical trials in Cuba for a needle-free mass vaccination device. So the vaccine industry has been down here using people as guinea pigs for a long time. And when they come out with some brand new technology, like, we've had a taste of that, people didn't want it. People don't want it. So it's a good source of clean blood is what I'm trying to say. Not just clean blood, clean eggs and clean sperm, because that's the other part of this.
Yeah, well, the developing world, you know, look at Brazil, right? I mean, that's where they did the studies on ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, where in the case of hydroxychloroquine, they gave near lethal doses,
Water
right? Which would be
blindness,
lethal
right?
to some people, right?
Yeah.
So they actually, it was murder by way of randomized control trial in Brazil to try to show hydroxychloroquine was harmful by way of overdosing them with amounts of
That's right.
hydroxychloroquine no one would ever take under any
Exactly right. It was a huge
and then
dose. I remember
they
that.
did the opposite of that, a sort of murder by neglect trial on ivermectin in Brazil, where I believe that was the Together trial. I'd have to review it, but it was one of those big trials. And they underdosed the recipients by 60. They only gave them 60% of the dose that they should have received for 60%
I don't think it was
of the
that
time.
much.
Yeah.
I don't think it was even that much.
Okay.
But it was
yeah.
the point is the books were cooked on purpose.
Yeah.
In Brazil, right? Another industrialized nation. And that's the commonality that you see. I don't know if you've seen the Deagle forecast on population and how why did they know? Why did Deagle know it was going to be a 73% decline in the U.S. population? Because they freaking planned it. That's why. All of this stuff has been written down. We actually have their playbook. That's why I'm able to tell people.
Back to your question on Hungary also.
Yeah, sorry.
But what I want to point out is that for anybody maybe who's listening to this and thinks what we're talking about is radical and, really, a cautious movement into this area of knowledge, right, is understandable, right? People don't want to believing wild conspiracy theories and things.
There's no theory.
Yeah, I know, which is unfortunate. We're having trouble finding the wild conspiracy theories because they're all turning true. But the point is that they've done this. They've used randomized control trials to suppress knowledge of.
That's right.
Even to the point of knowingly underdosing or overdosing the members of the trial who thought they were getting and leading to the deaths of some or many of them. That is absolute. That's the level of corruption and evil that we're up against. And if you think if they care about the blood supply, they don't. You need to protect yourself. And we need now to push the advantage. We're up against the gates of Mordor here. And we need to push, right? It's not just enough to win, Aragorn, he pushes it right to the gates of Mordor. And that's what we need to do with this Kennedy nomination, because like the Red Cross, listen to what the Red Cross did in July. They're very clever. They don't no longer, they control 24%, 25% of all blood donations in the US. Most people that we would match, or a lot of them, I should say 25%, a lot of people we would match would go through the Red Cross. Well, the Red Cross, for some reason, they suddenly don't like directed donations either. So what they did was they haven't prohibited it. But what they did was they created an amount of paperwork for the doctor that every doctor looks at in bulks. They're now requiring the doctors, if you say, I want a directed donation because I want to receive the blood of my choice. That's what we tell our people to say. Because if you say, I don't want vaccinated blood, then you could create hostility within
right away
the medical workers. So you just say, I want the blood of my choice for personal reasons. Well, they're going to say, okay, your doctor has to call every donor and read to every potential donor the possible risks to you. Like, who ever heard of this? Right? That's and the doctors are like, we're not doing that. Like, really, I went and got an MD. I'm a busy guy. I'm going to call this person on the phone and read through the stupid list. So they're refusing to do it. So we're running into trouble there. So what's so good about the re-election of Trump and what's going on is that I think we need a new, like a change in values here, a change in awareness and change in values, and a change in values in the medical establishment, that there are new sheriffs in town and suppressing people's medical freedoms for arbitrary reasons to their harm.
It's called
they're not arbitrary reasons, right? For corrupt reasons
this is
to their
malice
harm.
Of forethought. That's the point.
Has to be we've got to shift that burden.
Clinton, listen, man, I got to tell you, every time I see these guys dodging about a reckoning, holding people responsible, it makes me want to puke. And I know too many doctors and experts that have gone to Capitol Hill at the request of, good guys in the Senate, and they are told you can't talk about a reckoning, accountability, and you can't talk about exploding cancer rates. This is so pervasive. It's even amongst the good guys in our government. Some things are off limits, and holding people accountable is one of them. And I can tell you this, unless we hold people accountable, they're going to do it again. It's just a function of effort, because you have to, once you embrace the reality, third time, the reality, humanity itself is under attack. It is an extinction level event by intentionality. Until we embrace that, until we hold people accountable, this is going to happen again, maybe by a different
One of the
means.
most important things I think people can know is where they are in the fight, right?
Sure,
like if you're at the beginning of a football game, right, in the first quarter, and you're up by a touchdown, you're not necessarily winning, right? You're winning at that moment.
That's
It's
true.
Similarly,
At that moment.
Tennis match, you name it,
Good
in a
point.
war, right? Where you're winning is if you're up by a touchdown with 2 seconds to go and
Great
deep into
point.
the other person's, side of the field, right? So we're at the beginning part of winning. We're ahead. We've scored some touchdowns here. We've gotten the right team into the right position, right? But that's what people need to realize. Now is not the time to take the pedal off the gas or to say, oh, okay, well, things are fine, because everybody wants.
They're not
this has
fine.
been 4 harrowing years.
Yes, it has.
Very stressful for everyone. And whether you're vaccinated or not, if you bought the narrative, it was still a stressful 4 years. And so everybody kind of wants relief. And so but I'm saying this is not the time to think the fight's over. Now's the time to start accelerating the fight, and not to let our representatives get away with saying things like, we're not going to talk about exploding cancer rates or accountability. Are you kidding me? Accountability is absolutely essential, because we can't have this happening again.
Well, I love so much what you said earlier, Melissa. Thank you for coming back. I know you got questions, but you said this is your opportunity. Those that are watching, this is your opportunity to be in the fight in a meaningful way. And I've asked people, come join in, be a part of our research team or whatever. Pro se plaintiffs. This is actually so much more fundamental and easy. You can donate your blood. You can give some money, give some time, give eggs or sperm. You're helping the survival of our species by so doing. That is absolutely brilliant. And I'm behind you 100%. Melissa, what you got?
Yeah. So just so that people are aware, for example, before I knew about you, one of my last doctor's appointments with my doctor who delivered my first son, I asked him, I said, can I get directed donations? Unfortunately, I don't know anybody with my blood type that isn't vaccinated, but I just asked, and he said, we received donations through Red Cross, and that right away automatically is a red flag for me. And he was like, but you can talk to them and see about donating to yourself. Obviously they would have to take it, but then they get really confusing on the time frames. Could you break down the time frames for people when if they either want to donate to themselves or get a directed donation? What is the time frame before they need it by that it needs taken?
So donating to yourself is called autologous donation, or autologous. People pronounce it differently. And it was James Thorpe who, because he's OBGYN, right, really brought it to my attention of the value for pregnant women of donating, giving themselves autologous donations ahead of time. And you can do that, I believe about 40 days ahead, right? Because your blood only reconstitutes, you only replace your blood about 1 unit a month is about what you're able to do. And that's why it's limited how much you can give. So one thing you can do is that a pregnant woman, knowing she's going into delivery, can anticipate that an emergency is possible, right? And you may want to have, may need to have unvaccinated blood on hand, because anything that comes off of the shelf through, say, the Red Cross, we have to assume is going to be roughly 70+%
contaminated.
Vaccinated. Yeah, and we know from vaccinated donors, and we know from people who have been harmed from that blood, like say CC Baker, an important case. Matt Baker was interviewed on a number of shows, and I know him personally, and she's part of our study. She had to receive like about eight units a year ago last December, and that put her in the hospital for 26 days with clotting in the pericardial sac that had to be drained. I mean, they didn't know she would live. I mean, it was terrible. So she survived. She's well now, but that was harrowing. And to be honest, it's harrowing just to have to wonder, right?
Yes.
You don't want to even have to wonder, is what I just had to take in my body going to be like, have effects down the road? And so if you think that you might need more than a unit, then you definitely want to, connect with us to see about having something available ahead of your delivery. Can
you cryogenically save it? I think that's one of the things she's talking about. Well,
here's the thing. Yeah, they were trying that technology a couple of years ago. It has not been successful. And so That's the big unfortunate thing here, and that's again why we need policy changes. Okay, because the sad truth is, I tell everybody I drive very carefully. I'm like a grandma behind the wheel now. Okay, because I know that in an emergency, not even I can get guaranteed mRNA-free blood. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's just because there's not the time for processing. You know, Melissa, you mentioned processing. Yeah. You know, we like at least a couple week lead time is important for us. I mean, we've done it fast, but it's hard to get everything done in under 2 weeks. I mean, it's a challenge. I think the fastest we ever did was 4 days. Somebody contacted us and then had blood. But
that's pretty speedy.
You don't want to count on that kind of turnaround. You know, you might not be fortunate enough to be in an area where we could get somebody, you know, in right away, so that the blood can then be processed by the blood bank and all that. So you want lead time. That's a very important factor. And all the ins and outs of the exact amount of lead time, I don't know. I would just say the more the better. Okay. And then we need to. Oh, I'm sorry.
Is it true that it like goes bad though? Like you can't do it too soon in advance?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So about 40 days is roughly the. And this is why we need pressure to start being applied to the American Red Cross to be willing. And there are some people I know in Kentucky. There's some women who are working on this. A nurse by the name of Sierra Ham on getting blood banks locally to say, hey, we'll just segregate the blood, you know, so that if somebody says, hey, I want unvaccinated blood in an emergency, it's available. That you're not losing any supply. You're not, you know, you're just using the system that you have at hand. And they need to do that because
they distinguish your blood type. Why not just when they distinguish the blood type say I'm also not receiving the mRNA vaccine? Why is it that hard for them to just add one more question?
Well, no, it's not hard. It's lack of intent. Let me give you a story about
that's what that is
out of Switzerland. So George Della Pietra, our founder, he engaged because the Red Cross is originated in Switzerland, right? Their main thing is Switzerland. So
just like the flag
at that time, because there was a report. There was a French hospital that said that they were preferring unvaccinated blood. That came out. It was a big scandal. Eventually, they, you know, sort of kind of backpedaled. But the reason they had said that was because they were finding that the unvaccinated blood had a longer shelf life. So George contacted Swiss nurses that he was in touch with and said, you know, is this true? Are you guys seeing this? And they said, yes. If the blood's vaccinated, we need to get it into the patient much more quickly because it's liable to clot faster.
Whoa, of course.
Yeah, which is horrifying in itself.
Yes.
Like we need to get the blood into them faster, so because the shelf life's less. How about not at all, right? But and eventually, but those nurses were very conflicted about it. They eventually were part of the group that got canceled for being against this. But then anyhow, we were already seeing it back then. And so George contacted the Red Cross in Switzerland there. He's a Swiss resident himself, and said, you know, can we do something here? And that president at the time was just very forthright and basically said, well, it wouldn't be consistent for us to be promoting the vaccine and then vaccinating blood. So the Red Cross, then segregating the vaccinated blood as if there might be something wrong with it, right? They're saying it's safe and effective. They're insisting it's safe and effective. So by definition, there shouldn't be any problem with the blood. So this is, again, this is part of propaganda. This is just another,
that's right.
This is a practical effect of the propaganda that they have been promoting and are probably going to continue to promote because they don't want to be held accountable or be shown to be wrong or have there be any repercussions for all of the criminal stuff they did.
And much less malpractice. That was really well stated and exactly right. Do we have time for one more, Melissa?
Yeah, someone asked on CloutHUB, how do you guarantee that the person is receiving the blood that has been selected for them?
Well, yeah, that's the $1 million question right there. You know, there are no true guarantees right now. We are pushing for technology. We've already have invested in some, looking for what we need. Okay, and this is another reason. If you want to become donors, they want to go to safebloodfoundation.org, which is our 501c3, and donate there. What we need is testing, right? There could be so much done if we would develop testing that is so many applications beyond just whether the blood is safe or not in regards to vaccine particles. But that's what we need. We need, and it has to be very reliable. Okay. So we have to develop testing that is highly reliable. Okay. And, upwards of, 80, 90% reliable. Okay. That's rapid and that is cost effective. And so that technology is not here yet. It may be like on the doorstep. Maybe some people are already developing and about to bring it to market. I know a lot of people are trying, but without that testing, we're on the honor system. And so, and that's how it would be if a hospital does segregate, unless they're using like government records of something of who's been vaccinated.
I think you would be able to trust it just like as much as you're able to trust that you're getting the correct blood type donated to you. I mean, it's whoever's looking at that bag who's going to grab it and use it, right? Just like they have to look at their vials or look at anything else to confirm it.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that in an emergency, people don't have the time to go, wait, this is an anti-vaxxer. Oh yeah, well, I'm going to get you some vaccinated blood.
Right. It's a perceptive question. We don't see it as a practical concern, because your one choice is blood that's 70 to 80% from mRNA vaccinated individuals, which is a guaranteed that you're going to receive it if you need multiple units. And the other option is, if even half of 1% of people decide to become sort of oddball blood terrorists and say, I'm going to give my vaccinated blood and say I'm not vaccinated, that's you're so much safer off that way. And of course, we haven't experienced any cases of that. So, we don't expect it. There's easier ways to be on the side of the, propaganda narrative than go donate your blood.
There's also one more part before we run out of time, Melissa, that some people have been talking about as a function of trying to find clean blood, so that they've actually developed filters to filter out spike proteins and things of that nature. But my understanding is, the blood platelets themselves are giant compared to the lipid nanoparticles. I don't know how that technology exists. Do you know of this?
I'd say that doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
It's not real.
Cleaning mRNA out of the blood. Yeah. That we haven't heard of that.
They can't even make filtered needles that filter out hair or cardboard particles or.
Well, there's your answer.
I worked at Pfizer. I can tell you right now that you're getting medicine with metal, glass, hair, all different kinds of things in your unit. And when I would raise that concern at Pfizer, like, hey, why are some okay? Because you can find 7 before it's a problem, okay? And so they would say, oh, they use filtered needles. Doctors and nurses use filtered needles. And I kind of like, okay, cool. Well, then post whistleblowing, I've talked to hundreds of nurses, lots of doctors, and none of them use filtered needles. So I was kind of like, okay, well, I can imagine if the technology, if they're not actively using it for just injectables and all of that, they're not using it for blood. Because
and why would they care about your safety if the goal of the enterprise is to kill you? And the answer is they don't. And that's why you had the result that you did. Some people participating in the democide intentionally, others horrific, negligent homicide. One way or another, we've got to have accountability. In the meantime, Clinton, I can tell you this. I could talk with you for hours and hours, and I think our audience is going to want to have you back to drill in on the details. But this is a good first exposure because it's an answer. Everybody is thirsty for answers, thirsty for facts and truth. And you delivered a bunch today. And I'm so overjoyed to know that you're already in 50 nations, because this is a human problem. So God bless you and your people for putting this together, finding the solution. Everybody watching, please let us go and support that. safebloodfoundation.org. I like the lifetime membership idea. Yeah, put it in the description.
It's all in the description, and evidence of Clinton's claims are also in the description.
Fabulous.
Videos, testimonies, different things like that, all available down in the description.
Now, before I let you go, Glenn, aside from people donating blood and supporting your efforts here, is there anything else people can do to help you?
Yeah, absolutely. The protection of medical freedoms occurs at the state level, right? And so there was just a hearing in Wyoming. Very important. Contact your state legislatures and say, hey, directed donation it needs to be a medical freedom that's retained, and the ease of doctors to not be burdened by unnecessary and pointless paperwork and things like that. It needs to be effectively protected. And you can do that at a state level. It's a phone call, it's a letter, and it could one day save your life or a loved one.
Yeah. Well, and save our species. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, this is saving our species. So God bless you for doing that. Thank you for being here. I hope to have you back soon. You are welcome at any time. And if you have updates, please let us know, because we're going to have a very thirsty audience for this kind of information. So
Great.
thank you for all your efforts.
Well, thank you. It's
You're
a
a
pleasure.
welcome sight. It's really an honor to know you. All right.
Thank you.
God bless
Good.
all. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, thank you.